Hey everyone, welcome back. Today, we're diving into one of the most powerful and life-changing books ever written about money and mindset, Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. This isn't just a story about getting rich. It's a story about breaking free from fear, from financial stress, and from the belief that your job defines your worth. If you've ever felt stuck working hard but never really getting ahead, this episode might just change the way you think about money forever. So stay tuned until the end, because every lesson in this book has the potential to shift your future in a massive way. There's a book that has changed the way millions of people think about money, a book that doesn't just teach you how to get rich, but how to think differently about wealth itself. Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki is not your typical financial guide filled with charts, formulas, and complicated terms. It's a story of two fathers, two mindsets, and two very different paths in life. One father was well-educated, hard-working, and believed in getting a stable job, earning a steady paycheck, and climbing the ladder of success. The other had very little formal education, but he understood how money actually worked. He believed in making money work for him. Robert grew up listening to both, and the lessons from those two voices shaped everything he would later teach the world about financial freedom. Kiyosaki calls them his two dads, his biological father, whom he refers to as the poor dad, and the father of his childhood best friend, whom he calls the rich dad. These two men loved their families, worked hard, and wanted the best for their children, but their beliefs about money were completely opposite. Poor Dad would say, "Go to school, get good grades, find a secure job, and save money." Rich Dad would say, "Learn how money works, invest wisely, and let your money work for you." One believed in security, the other believed in freedom. When you think about it, this conflict still exists today. Many of us were raised by the voice of Poor Dad, the belief that good education automatically leads to financial success, that saving is safer than investing, and that debt is always bad. But look around. In today's world, some of the wealthiest people didn't take the traditional route. Think of Elon Musk, who dropped out of Stanford to build his own companies, or people who started small YouTube channels, online businesses, or invested in real estate and turned those ideas into income streams. They're not necessarily smarter. They just learned what Rich Dad taught Robert, that money is a tool, not the goal. Kiyosaki wrote this book because he realized that traditional education doesn't teach financial education. We learn how to read, write, and do math, but we're never taught how to manage money, build assets, or create wealth. As a result, many hardworking people spend their entire lives trapped in what he calls the rat race, working for money, paying bills, and hoping that one day they'll have enough to retire. But the sad truth is, most never do. Rich Dad, Poor Dad was written to wake people up, to show that financial freedom doesn't come from how much you earn, but from how you think. More than 20 years have passed since this book was first published. Yet its message is more relevant than ever. We live in an age where everything is changing, jobs are disappearing, technology is replacing traditional work, and the economy feels more uncertain than ever. In this world, understanding money isn't just useful, it's survival. This is why Rich Dad, Poor Dad still speaks to new generations. It challenges us to unlearn what we were taught, to question the system, and to think like the rich, not because we want to be greedy, but because we want to be free. In this podcast, we're not just summarizing a book. We're diving into a mindset, a way of seeing money as energy, as possibility, and as something that should serve us, not control us. If you stay until the end, you'll see that this isn't just about money at all. It's about choice. It's about freedom. And it starts with one simple decision, to stop working for money, and start learning how to make money work for you. Robert Kiyosaki grew up with two powerful voices shaping the way he saw the world. His poor dad, his real father, was a highly educated man. He had a PhD, worked for the government, and believed deeply in the system. He was intelligent, responsible, and hardworking, but he struggled financially all his life. Then there was his rich dad, the father of his best friend Mike. This man never finished 8th grade, yet he eventually became one of the wealthiest men in Hawaii. He owned businesses, invested in real estate, and taught young Robert lessons about money that schools would never teach. The contrast between these two men became the foundation of everything in Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Poor Dad represented the traditional path that most people are taught to follow: go to school, get a secure job, save money, and one day you'll retire comfortably. It sounds logical, right? That's what society tells us. But Rich Dad saw the world differently. He would say, don't just work for money. Learn how money works. Build or buy assets that generate income even when you're not working. Poor Dad believed in getting good grades. Rich Dad believed in getting good deals. Poor Dad believed the government would take care of you. Rich Dad believed in taking care of yourself. Poor Dad would say, I can't afford it. Rich Dad would say, how can I afford it? One statement closes the mind. The other opens it. That single difference in language is what separates the rich from everyone else. It's not luck or inheritance, it's mindset. Imagine two people today. One works a 9-to-5 job, gets a paycheck every 2 weeks, and uses that money to pay bills, buy a nicer phone, maybe finance a car. The other person earns the same amount but chooses to invest a portion, maybe in stocks, digital products, or real estate. Over time, the first person stays busy working harder and harder just to keep up. The second person slowly builds something that works even when they're asleep. That's exactly what Kiyosaki learned from watching his two dads. One taught him how to survive, the other taught him how to grow. Rich Dad didn't hate jobs. He simply understood their limits. A job gives you security, but it doesn't give you freedom. When you trade your time for money, you always hit a ceiling because time is limited. But when you build systems, businesses, or investments, money starts to work for you, and that's when your life begins to change. In one of the book's most memorable moments, young Robert and his friend Mike asked Rich Dad how they could get rich. Instead of giving them an answer, Rich Dad put them to work in one of his stores for 10 cents an hour. After weeks of frustration, Robert finally confronted him. He felt used, underpaid, and angry. That's when Rich Dad smiled and said, now you're learning. Most people let life push them around because they're afraid of not having money, afraid of losing their jobs. But if you learn to master that fear, money will start working for you. That story hits hard even today. Think about how many people stay stuck in jobs they hate because they're afraid of losing a steady paycheck. Fear controls them. But Rich Dad taught Robert to see money as a game you can learn to play, if you're willing to think differently. The two dads weren't just people in his life, they were symbols of two systems of belief. Poor Dad stood for conventional wisdom, security, and dependence. Rich Dad stood for self-education, independence, and freedom. Between those two worlds, Kiyosaki made his choice, and through his story, he invites us to make ours too. In today's world, that choice is more important than ever. The job market is unstable. Technology is reshaping everything, and traditional career paths no longer guarantee safety. The people who thrive now are those who think like Rich Dad, people who learn continuously, adapt quickly, and see opportunities where others see risk. Whether you're a freelancer, an investor, or just someone starting out, the lesson remains the same. Your mindset about money will decide your future far more than your paycheck ever will. One of the first lessons that truly shocked Robert Kiyosaki as a young boy was this: the rich don't work for money. It sounded confusing, even arrogant. After all, everyone works for money, right? But Rich Dad wasn't saying the rich don't work hard, he meant that they work for something else: knowledge, leverage, and control over money itself. To understand this lesson, you have to go back to that moment in Robert's childhood when he and his friend Mike were working in Rich Dad's small convenience store. They were earning 10 cents an hour, doing boring tasks, and feeling completely exploited. After weeks of frustration, Robert finally confronted Rich Dad and demanded to be paid more. That's when Rich Dad laughed and said something that would stick with him forever: if you get used to working for money, you'll spend your whole life being controlled by it. Learn to make money work for you, and you'll be free. That lesson isn't just about money, it's about fear and desire. Rich Dad explained that most people spend their entire lives driven by two emotions: the fear of not having enough, and the desire to have more. They fear being broke, so they work harder, take on more debt, buy nicer things to feel better, and end up even more trapped. They work for money, but money controls them. The rich, on the other hand, use those same emotions differently. They still feel fear and desire, but instead of letting those emotions control them, they use them as fuel to think smarter, take calculated risks, and look for opportunities. Think about how this plays out today. You see someone working 60 hours a week just to pay off credit cards, car loans, or a mortgage. They look successful, but in reality, they're just running faster on the treadmill. Meanwhile, another person might work fewer hours, but they're building something, a business, a YouTube channel, a portfolio of investments. That second person isn't lazy. They're just playing a different game, the game Rich Dad was talking about. Kiyosaki learned that the poor and middle class often say things like, "I need a raise," or "I need a second job." But the rich say, "How can I create more income streams?" The first mindset focuses on working harder, the second focuses on working smarter. One is about trading time for money, the other is about using money, ideas, and systems to create value. Today, that lesson is more relevant than ever. With automation, AI, and digital platforms, the traditional model of working a single job for 40 years is fading. The people who thrive are those who know how to leverage their time and knowledge, building something once that keeps generating income. It could be an online course, a real estate property, or even a side hustle that scales with technology. The point isn't what you do, it's how you think about money while doing it. Rich Dad used to tell Robert, "The moment you see yourself as a worker, you stop thinking like an owner." That's powerful, because once you start thinking like an owner, even if you're still an employee, you start to notice opportunities that others ignore. You begin to understand cash flow, assets, and the importance of making money move for you instead of you chasing it. Let's take a modern example. Imagine two people making the same salary, $3 a month. One spends nearly all of it on rent, food, and lifestyle upgrades. The other lives modestly and invests $500 a month in index funds, or uses it to start a small online business. 5 years later, one person is still depending on the next paycheck, while the other has built a foundation of income that doesn't rely on working more hours. Same income, completely different outcome. That's the essence of this lesson. Rich Dad's message wasn't that working is bad. Work is necessary, especially when you're learning. But if you only work for money, you'll always be limited by your time and your fears. If you work to learn, to build, and to invest, you eventually reach a point where money begins to chase you. This idea might sound simple, but it's revolutionary because it challenges how we were raised. From childhood, we're taught to value job security over financial freedom, to seek stability instead of opportunity. But the world is changing fast. The people who understand this lesson, who stop working for money and start learning how money works, are the ones who will thrive, no matter what happens to the economy. As Rich Dad told Robert, "Don't be a slave to money. Be its master." That single shift in perspective, from working for money to making money work for you, is what separates those who struggle all their lives from those who eventually achieve freedom. And that, Kiyosaki says, is the first step toward becoming truly rich, not just in your bank account, but in your mindset. If there's one idea at the heart of Rich Dad Poor Dad, it's this: to become rich, you must be financially literate. That means understanding how money actually works, how it flows, how it grows, and how it disappears. Most people think being smart about money just means earning more. But Kiyosaki shows us that it's not about how much you make. It's about how much you keep, how hard that money works for you, and how many generations it lasts. Rich Dad used to say, "The reason most people struggle financially is because they spend years in school but learn nothing about money." Think about that for a second. We're taught history, literature, and even calculus, but almost no one learns how to manage debt, invest, or build assets. As a result, even highly educated people end up living paycheck to paycheck. They make good money, but they don't know how to keep it. Financial literacy, according to Kiyosaki, begins with one simple concept: understanding the difference between assets and liabilities. It sounds basic, but it's the key to everything. An asset is something that puts money into your pocket. A liability is something that takes money out of your pocket. That's it. It doesn't matter how impressive something looks if it takes money away from you each month. It's not an asset. Take a house, for example. Most people think their home is their greatest asset. But if you're paying a mortgage, property tax, and maintenance every month without earning anything from it, then it's actually a liability. Now, if that same house is rented out and generates positive cash flow, money coming in that exceeds your costs, then it becomes an asset. The difference isn't in what it is, but how it works for you. Rich Dad used to draw a simple diagram for Robert, 4 boxes showing income, expenses, assets, and liabilities. Poor Dad's diagram showed money coming in from a salary, going straight out to expenses and debts. Rich Dad's diagram showed money flowing from assets, rental properties, businesses, or investments, into income, and then being reinvested to buy more assets. It's a completely different pattern of cash flow, and that pattern is what separates financial freedom from financial struggle. Let's put this in modern terms. Imagine 2 friends, Sarah and Tom. They both earn $3 a month. Sarah spends hers on a nice car with monthly payments, the newest iPhone, and frequent nights out. Tom, on the other hand, buys a used car, keeps his phone for another year, and uses the extra money to start investing in index funds and learning about real estate. After 3 years, Sarah has new stuff but no savings, while Tom owns assets that generate income. That's financial literacy in action. Kiyosaki believes the biggest financial problem isn't lack of money, it's lack of understanding. People don't know how to read a financial statement. They don't track cash flow. They don't know where their money goes. And that ignorance makes them easy to control. That's why Rich Dad told Robert, if you want to be rich, you must first learn how to read numbers. Numbers tell the story of a business, a person, or an economy. Without that skill, money will always be a mystery to you. This lesson is even more critical today. Credit cards, online shopping, and buy now, pay later, make it easy to live in debt without realizing it. People buy things that look like assets, a fancy car, a bigger home, a new gadget, but they end up owning nothing of real value. Financial literacy teaches you to look deeper. Is this purchase going to feed me? Or will it feed off me? The truth is, the financially illiterate work for money. The financially literate make money work for them. They don't just earn, they build, protect, and multiply. That's why Kiyosaki says you don't need to be rich to start learning. You need to learn first so you can become rich. So how do you start becoming financially literate? First, understand your cash flow. Know exactly how much comes in and how much goes out. Second, identify your assets and liabilities, and be brutally honest about which is which. Third, focus on increasing assets that generate passive income. It could be a small online store, a digital product, or an investment that pays dividends. The goal is to build streams of income that don't depend on your daily effort. Financial literacy isn't about being perfect with money. It's about being aware. Once you start seeing money the way the rich see it, as a tool, as energy that can be directed and multiplied, your relationship with it changes forever. You stop asking, how can I earn more, and start asking, how can I make my money earn for me? That's the real foundation of wealth, not luck, not inheritance, but knowledge. As Rich Dad said, if you want to be rich, you need to be financially smart. It's not about how much money you make, it's about how much you keep and how many generations it lasts. One of the most misunderstood lessons in Rich Dad Poor Dad is when Robert Kiyosaki's mentor says, mind your own business. At first, that might sound like a rude phrase, something people say when they want you to stay out of their affairs. But Rich Dad meant something completely different. He wasn't talking about gossip or privacy. He was talking about focus, about understanding the difference between working for someone else's dream and building your own. Most people, Rich Dad explained, spend their entire lives minding someone else's business. They work for a company, help it grow, help it make profit, and then use their paycheck to pay bills, rent, and debt. Month after month, year after year, they help other people get rich. But they never build anything for themselves. Rich Dad's advice was simple: while you're working for others, don't forget to build your own business on the side. Now, that doesn't mean you have to quit your job tomorrow. What it means is that you should always be developing something that belongs to you, something that can grow without depending on your employer. It could be a small side hustle, a digital brand, a rental property, or even investments that earn you money while you sleep. In other words, while you're earning a salary, you should also be building your asset column. Kiyosaki describes how the rich focus on their asset column more than their income statement. Poor Dad was proud of his paycheck, promotions, and job title. Rich Dad, on the other hand, focused on acquiring assets, things that would keep paying him long after he stopped working. This mindset shift is critical. Your job feeds your expenses, but your assets feed your future. Let's bring that into today's world. Think about someone like Emma. She works full-time at a marketing agency. Every month, she sets aside a bit of her paycheck to create online courses teaching social media strategy. Over time, her courses start generating income on their own. A few years later, Emma's side business becomes her main business. She's still working, but now, she's working for herself. That's what it means to mind your own business. Or consider John, who works as an engineer. Instead of spending all his bonus money, he uses it to buy shares of solid companies and reinvests the dividends. Over time, that investment portfolio grows to a point where the returns exceed his monthly expenses. John didn't win the lottery, he simply shifted his focus from labor income to asset income. That's financial independence built one decision at a time. Rich Dad's lesson is also about identity. Poor Dad identified as an employee, he valued security, benefits, and approval. Rich Dad identified as an owner, he valued independence, risk, and growth. Kiyosaki learned that you can be both at the same time if you think like an owner. Even while you're still employed. That means paying attention to how your money flows, how your skills can create value, and how to convert earned income into asset income. One of Rich Dad's favorite sayings was, "You can't see money with your eyes. You have to see it with your mind." What he meant is that opportunities don't always appear obvious. They often start as ideas, connections, or small side projects that you nurture over time. Those small ideas, when consistent, become the foundation of financial freedom. In today's digital era, this advice has never been more achievable. You can start a small online business with almost no money, sell digital products, build a personal brand, or invest in assets like stocks or real estate through simple apps on your phone. The tools are available to everyone, but only those who mind their own business use them intentionally. Rich Dad wasn't against having a job. He believed a job can be a great place to learn, to build skills, and to gather experience, but he warned Robert never to confuse his profession with his business. Your profession is what you do to make money today. Your business is what will make you money tomorrow. If you stop working today and your income stops too, you don't have a business, you have a job. That's a powerful truth, and it's also a wake-up call. Because if all your energy goes into building someone else's company, you'll always depend on them for your livelihood. But if you start small, even with a few hours a week, to create something that belongs to you, you begin to shift from dependence to independence. So, mind your own business isn't selfish advice. It's freedom advice. It means take ownership of your financial life. Build assets that work for you. Learn how to turn your skills and creativity into something lasting. As Kiyosaki often says, the rich build assets, the poor build liabilities, the middle class build someone else's business. In the end, this lesson isn't about quitting your job or chasing quick money. It's about balance, working hard in your current role while quietly, steadily building your own foundation for the future. Because one day, that side project, that investment, that idea you kept nurturing, it could become the business that changes your life. When Robert Kiyosaki was young, he didn't understand why Rich Dad seemed to admire corporations so much. To him, a corporation was just a big building with a logo on it. But as he grew older, he realized that corporations were more than just businesses, they were tools of financial intelligence. They were how the rich protected and multiplied their wealth. To explain this, Rich Dad began with a bit of history. He said that originally, Taxes were created to punish the rich. In the early 1900s, the government introduced income tax under the promise that it would only target the wealthy. The poor and middle class supported it because they thought it would never apply to them. But over time, the system changed. The government needed more money. And gradually, taxes expanded to everyone. Now, the working class pays the largest share of taxes, while the wealthy, those who understand the system, legally pay the least. Rich Dad wasn't encouraging tax evasion. What he was teaching was financial education, understanding how the rules work. Because the rules are different depending on how you earn your money. Employees earn, get taxed, and then spend what's left. Business owners and investors, on the other hand, earn, spend, and then get taxed on what's left. It's a complete reversal of order. And it makes all the difference. Here's how Rich Dad explained it. When you work as an employee, your money flows like this: you earn, you pay taxes, and then you spend what's left. But when you own a corporation, the flow changes. Your corporation earns, spends on legitimate business expenses, and then pays taxes on what's left. In other words, you get to use pre-tax dollars for things like travel, meals, education, equipment, or even your car, as long as they're part of the business. That's why Rich Dad said, the rich don't evade taxes, they play by different rules. To someone who's never learned this, it might sound unfair, but the truth is, anyone can learn the same principles. The system rewards those who create value: entrepreneurs, investors, and innovators who take risks, create jobs, and stimulate the economy. That's why tax laws are written to favor them. Rich Dad's message wasn't to complain about the system, but to learn how to use it wisely. Let's bring this into today's world. Think about people like Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos. Their companies generate billions in revenue, yet they personally pay relatively low income tax compared to their wealth. That's not because they're cheating, it's because their wealth is tied up in assets like stocks and businesses. Not in a monthly salary. They reinvest, they borrow against their assets, and they let their corporations handle the heavy lifting. Meanwhile, ordinary employees pay taxes on every paycheck before they even touch their money. It's the same system, just used differently. Now, of course, you don't need to be a billionaire to use these principles. Many small business owners and freelancers already benefit from them. For example, if you run a small online store or freelance graphic design business, you can legally deduct part of your home office, your internet, your laptop, and even your phone as business expenses. You're not cheating the system, you're using it intelligently. That's what Rich Dad meant when he said, the rich use the system to their advantage because they understand it. The key point here is not just about taxes, it's about control. Employees have very little control over how their income is taxed. Business owners and investors, on the other hand, have options. They decide how to structure their income, when to take profits, how to reinvest, and how to manage risk. That flexibility is what allows them to build and preserve wealth across generations. Rich Dad often said, financial education gives you the power to choose your own destiny. The more you know about how money and taxes work, the less you depend on luck or politics. Complaining about taxes won't make you rich, understanding them might. Let's look at a real-life modern example. Suppose you earn $5 a month as an employee. After taxes, you might take home around $3.800. But if you own a small business that earns the same $5, you could first deduct expenses like marketing, travel, education, and tools before paying taxes, potentially reducing your taxable income to $2 or less. You're legally keeping more money simply because you understand how to use the rules to your advantage. That's the power of corporations, not just the big ones, but even small LLCs or personal companies that give you flexibility and protection. Rich Dad taught that a corporation is like a shield. It separates you from your business liabilities and gives you a smarter way to manage your finances. He would often tell Robert, the rich build companies, the poor and middle class work for them. The lesson here isn't about becoming a tax expert overnight. It's about shifting your mindset, from being a passive participant in the economy to being an active player. When you understand how money flows through businesses, you start seeing opportunities everywhere. You stop asking, "Why is the system unfair?" and start asking, "How can I play smarter within the system?" That's what Rich Dad wanted Robert to learn, not to fear taxes. Not to hate the rich. But to realize that the real power lies in financial knowledge. Once you know the rules of the game, you can finally stop playing defense and start playing offense. Rich Dad once told Robert, "The rich don't wait for opportunities. They create them." That single sentence shaped how Robert looked at life forever. Most people believe that opportunities are rare, that you need luck, connections, or perfect timing to succeed. But Rich Dad believed the opposite. He said that money is an idea. And ideas are everywhere if you know how to see them. The problem isn't the lack of opportunities, it's the lack of financial education to recognize them. When Robert was growing up, he watched people around him say things like, "I can't afford it," or "I wish I had more money." But Rich Dad would always correct him, saying, "Don't say, 'I can't afford it.' Ask yourself, 'How can I afford it?'" That small change of question shifts your mind from being a victim to being a creator. It forces your brain to search for solutions instead of excuses. And that, according to Rich Dad, is where wealth begins, not in your wallet, but in your mindset. Rich Dad explained that the rich invent money because they understand how to use financial intelligence, the ability to combine knowledge of accounting, investing, markets, and the law to find or create opportunities others don't see. They see money flow the way an engineer sees systems. They know how to build something from nothing. Take an example from today's world. Think of Airbnb. The founders didn't own hotels. Yet they created a platform that turned spare rooms into income-generating assets for millions of people worldwide. They didn't invent a product. They invented a system that multiplied money through other people's properties. That's financial creativity at its best. Rich Dad always said, "You can have money problems, or you can have money ideas. When you're trained to see opportunities, even problems become profitable." For instance, when the economy crashes, most people panic and sell. But investors who understand the game see it as a sale, an opportunity to buy assets at a discount. When others see fear, the rich see leverage. Robert remembered one time when he was young and wanted to buy a small piece of real estate but didn't have enough money for a down payment. Instead of giving up, Rich Dad challenged him, "Find a way without using your own money." It sounded impossible, but it forced Robert to think creatively. Eventually, he found a seller willing to finance part of the deal in exchange for a higher interest rate. Robert didn't use his own savings, he used the deal itself to make it happen. That's what Rich Dad meant when he said, "The rich invent money." In today's digital age, this lesson is even more powerful. Look at people who build online businesses, digital courses, or YouTube channels. Many of them start with zero capital. Just an idea, a laptop, and determination. They create value out of information, creativity, and consistency, and then they monetize it through ads, products, or services. That's modern-day money invention. Rich Dad often said that money doesn't disappear, it just moves, from those who don't understand it to those who do. When you lack financial education, you become a target, but when you understand money, you become a magnet. That's why he pushed Robert so hard to study investing, accounting, and economics, not just to make money, but to understand how it moves. Another key idea in this chapter is risk. Most people think the rich take big risks. But in reality, the rich take calculated risks, and only after they've built enough knowledge to minimize danger. It's not gambling, it's strategy. Rich Dad used to compare it to driving a car. To someone who's never driven before, it seems risky, but once you learn the rules, practice, and gain experience, driving becomes second nature. Investing is the same way, it's only risky when you don't know what you're doing. Rich Dad taught Robert that financial intelligence comes from 4 main skills. 1. Understanding numbers, knowing how to read financial statements and see patterns others miss. 2. Understanding markets, recognizing where people's attention, money, and needs are shifting. 3. Understanding the law, using corporations, tax systems, and contracts to protect yourself. 4. Understanding investing, knowing how to make your money grow through cash flow and assets. When you master these, You stop depending on a paycheck. You can create wealth from ideas, opportunities, and timing. Let's think about a modern illustration. During the rise of cryptocurrencies, some people saw them as scams, while others studied and understood blockchain technology early. They recognized the potential, invested wisely, and built enormous wealth. It wasn't luck, it was awareness and preparation. As Rich Dad said, luck is when opportunity meets preparation. But the message of this chapter isn't just about making money. It's about developing a creative mindset that sees beyond limits. The world is full of problems, but each problem hides a potential business idea. When people complain, entrepreneurs listen. When others wait for things to happen, the rich make things happen. Rich Dad believed that financial education turns your mind into your most valuable asset. Your brain, he said, is your greatest money-making machine, if you train it. The poor and middle class work hard with their hands. The rich work smart with their minds. To summarize this lesson, Rich Dad told Robert one of his favorite lines: "It's not about resources, it's about resourcefulness." You don't need to start rich to become rich. You just need to start thinking differently. So the next time you see a challenge, ask yourself, where's the opportunity here? That simple shift in mindset can transform how you see the world, because once you train your mind to see opportunities, you'll never be poor again. Rich Dad once said, "The difference between a rich person and a poor person isn't how much they make, it's how they handle fear." That line stayed with Robert for life. Because no matter how smart you are, no matter how much you learn about money, you'll face the same 5 obstacles that stop most people from becoming rich: fear, cynicism, laziness, bad habits, and arrogance. Let's start with fear. Everyone is afraid of losing money, that's normal. But what separates the rich from everyone else is how they react to that fear. Poor and middle-class people let fear stop them. They say, "I don't want to lose money." So they never take risks. But the rich accept that losing is part of the game. They know that mistakes are not failures, they're lessons. Rich Dad told Robert, if you want to be rich, you have to learn to manage loss, not avoid it. Think about it like learning to ride a bike. You fall, you scrape your knees, you get back up, and you try again. Investing is no different. You can't become financially confident without a few bruises along the way. The fear never disappears, you just learn to act despite it. Rich Dad said, courage is doing what you're afraid of. Stupidity is doing nothing. Then comes cynicism, the voice of doubt that whispers, "What if it doesn't work?" Or, "The market's too risky." Cynicism kills more dreams than failure ever could. There will always be people telling you it's impossible, that the economy's bad, the system's unfair, or it's too late to start. But as Rich Dad said, the cynics criticize, the rich analyze. When others complain, the rich do their homework. They gather facts, calculate risks, and make decisions based on information, not fear. A great modern example is the rise of electric vehicles. Years ago, when Elon Musk started Tesla, critics laughed. They said electric cars would never replace gasoline engines. But while cynics were talking, Musk was building. Now Tesla isn't just a car company, it's a revolution. That's what happens when you replace doubt with vision. The third obstacle is laziness, but not the kind you think. Rich Dad said laziness doesn't always mean doing nothing, sometimes it means staying too busy to deal with what really matters. Many people hide behind work, pretending to be productive while avoiding financial responsibility. They say, "I'm working hard," but they never take time to think about their money, to learn how to invest, or to plan their future. Rich Dad used to laugh and say, "Poor people work hard so they don't have to think." To overcome that, Rich Dad taught the power of motivation through desire. He said, when you have a strong reason, you'll find a way. If your motivation is strong enough, freedom, family, purpose, you'll overcome laziness naturally. You'll make time for what matters. Next is bad habits. Many people have habits that quietly drain their financial energy, spending before saving, ignoring expenses, or living paycheck to paycheck. Rich Dad's rule was simple: pay yourself first. That means before paying bills, before spending on anything else, put money aside for investments. At first, it might feel impossible. The pressure of bills will make you uncomfortable. But that's the point. That discomfort pushes you to find new ways to make money. It builds discipline. It turns saving into strength. He said, "Poor people pay everyone else first. Rich people pay themselves first." Over time, this one habit builds the foundation for wealth. And finally, there's arrogance, the most dangerous obstacle of all. Arrogance is when you think you already know everything, so you stop learning. Rich Dad said, "Every time you're arrogant, you lose money." The rich stay humble and curious. They ask questions. They read, study, and surround themselves with people who know more than they do. The moment you believe you're too smart to learn, the game ends. Robert saw this happen many times, people who earned a lot but lost everything because they refused to listen. Refused to adapt. The world of money is always changing. Technology, laws, and opportunities evolve constantly. To stay rich, you must keep learning. Rich Dad's philosophy on overcoming obstacles wasn't about avoiding pain. It was about building resilience. He said, "Every time you overcome one of these fears, you grow stronger. Your confidence compounds like interest." That's how financial freedom is earned, not through comfort, but through courage. He also taught Robert to celebrate small wins. When you make your first investment, even if it's small, that's progress. When you make your first mistake and learn from it, that's growth. When you face fear and act anyway, that's victory. Every step counts. To connect this lesson to today's world, think about the people who quit their 9-to-5 jobs to start online businesses or invest in real estate. Many of them failed multiple times before succeeding. But because they didn't quit, because they kept learning, they built freedom for themselves. The richest lessons come from the hardest moments. Rich Dad used to say, "The more you seek security, the less secure you become. The more you seek opportunity, the more secure you'll feel." That's the paradox of wealth. Real security comes from confidence, not comfort. So, if you want to overcome obstacles on your path to financial freedom, start by facing your fears, silencing your doubts, building good habits, staying humble, and never stopping your education. That's what separates those who dream of being rich from those who actually become rich. Because in the end, the journey to wealth isn't about money, it's about who you become along the way. When people finished hearing Rich Dad's lessons, they often asked Robert the same question, "Okay, I get it, but where do I start?" And that's the hardest part, because starting is where most people get stuck. They wait for the right time, the perfect plan, or the ideal amount of money. But as Rich Dad always said, you don't wait to be ready, you get ready by starting. Getting started isn't about having money. It's about having a reason. You need a purpose that's bigger than your fears. Rich Dad told Robert, "If you don't have a strong reason, you'll quit at the first sign of trouble." So, step 1 is to find your why. Maybe it's freedom, to never depend on a paycheck again. Maybe it's family, to give your children a better future. Or maybe it's pride, to prove to yourself that you can do it. Whatever your reason, it has to be strong enough to pull you forward when everything gets hard. Step 2 is to choose what you want to learn. Most people work to earn money, the rich work to learn. If you want to be rich, start by studying the skills that build wealth: sales, marketing, investing, communication, and leadership. Don't chase money, chase knowledge. Because knowledge will create money later. Rich Dad said, "The more specialized your knowledge, the more valuable you become." For example, if you're a graphic designer, learn how to sell your designs online or run ads. If you're a teacher, learn how to create digital courses. If you're good at numbers, learn how to analyze investments. You don't need to quit your job, just start adding financial education into your daily life. The third step is to take small, smart actions. Don't wait for $1 million idea, start with what you have. Open a small savings account and label it investment fund. Read one book a month about money. Listen to financial podcasts. Follow people who teach you, not just entertain you. Every small step builds momentum. Robert's first investment wasn't huge, it was a small piece of real estate that taught him how cash flow works. He made mistakes, but he learned lessons no classroom could teach. That's how real financial education happens, not in theory, but in action. Rich Dad used to tell him, "The hardest part of building wealth isn't earning money, it's developing the mindset to manage it." Because if you don't learn how to control your emotions, money will always control you. So as you start, learn to be patient. Success won't happen overnight, and that's okay. Real wealth takes time to grow, just like a tree. You plant the seed, water it, and let time do its work. Step 4 is to choose your friends wisely. Rich Dad said, "Your environment is stronger than your willpower." If you hang around people who complain about money, you'll start thinking like them. But if you surround yourself with people who talk about ideas, opportunities, and investments, your mindset will naturally expand. That's why networking and mentorship are so powerful. You rise to the level of the people you spend time with. Today, that's easier than ever. You can join online communities, attend workshops, or connect with like-minded people who are also learning to be financially independent. The right environment can transform your entire perspective. Step 5. Pay yourself first. No matter how small the amount, even if it's just 10% of your income, make it a rule. That money is for your future, not your bills. When you pay yourself first, you're training your brain to prioritize your wealth. Over time, it becomes a habit, and habits build empires. Rich Dad used to say, "Discipline is the bridge between your goals and your wealth." You can't build wealth with emotion, you build it with consistency. The 6th step is to focus on cash flow, not capital gains. Most people buy something hoping it'll go up in price. That's gambling. The rich look for assets that pay them every month: real estate, businesses, royalties, or investments that produce income. Cash flow gives you freedom. Appreciation gives you hope. Always choose freedom first. Now, one of the most important lessons in this chapter is about being generous. Rich Dad believed in giving. He said, "If you want something, first give it away. If you want money, give knowledge, service, or value to others." That's how money finds you, through the value you create. In a world obsessed with taking, the givers always stand out. Let's bring this to today's world. Imagine someone who starts a small YouTube channel teaching personal finance, or shares tips about saving money, or invests time helping others learn what they've discovered. At first, they might not make a dollar, but eventually, that generosity builds trust, and trust turns into opportunity, sponsorships, business partnerships, or even passive income. That's how giving becomes growing. Rich Dad's final advice on getting started was simple but powerful: start small. But think big. Most people never start because they think too big too soon. But the truth is, even a tiny step forward beats standing still. Start learning, start saving, start investing, start creating. The sooner you start, the sooner your money starts working for you. And remember, you don't need to be perfect, you just need to be persistent. Every expert was once a beginner who decided to take that first uncomfortable step. Rich Dad often reminded Robert, "The moment you take control of your money, you take control of your life." So, if you're listening to this right now and wondering how to begin, start with what you have: your mind, your curiosity, your determination. Read, learn, act, repeat. Don't let fear or excuses hold you back. Because the secret to getting ahead is simply this: get started. By the time Robert finished learning from his rich dad, he realized that knowledge alone wasn't enough. You could read 100 books, attend seminars, and take courses, but if you never apply what you learn, nothing changes. That's why this final part of Rich Dad Poor Dad is all about action, small, practical steps you can take to start thinking, acting, and living like the rich. Rich Dad often said, "The world is full of smart poor people. Don't just be one of them." The goal is not to know everything about money, but to do something with what you already know. So, if you still want more, if you're ready to move from learning to doing, here's where to begin. First, stop doing what doesn't work. If your job, habits, or spending patterns aren't getting you closer to financial freedom, change them. Most people are stuck because they keep repeating the same actions while expecting new results. Rich Dad called this the poor man's loop: working hard, paying bills, and starting over every month. The moment you decide to break that loop, your life starts to change. Second, look for new ideas. Opportunities are everywhere, but they hide in plain sight. Every new technology, problem, or trend creates a chance to build wealth. Don't just consume, observe. Ask yourself, what do people need that doesn't exist yet? Or, how can I solve this better? In today's world, innovation isn't just for inventors, it's for anyone who can think creatively. Third, take classes, read books, and attend workshops, not just for motivation, but for skills. Learn about real estate, investing, marketing, or entrepreneurship. Every skill you add multiplies your earning power. Rich Dad said, education is cheap compared to ignorance. One book, one mentor, or one conversation can save you years of mistakes. Fourth, find people who challenge you. Don't be the smartest person in the room. Be around those who know more, do more, and think bigger than you. Ask questions, listen carefully, and don't be afraid to sound inexperienced. The rich love curiosity, it's the fuel of growth. Fifth, start small investments. You don't need to buy a building or start a company right away. Begin by learning how to make your money grow, even with $100. Invest in index funds, start a side business, or buy books that teach you about real estate. The point isn't the amount, it's the habit. Once you start making your money work for you, you'll never see money the same way again. Sixth, use your assets to buy luxuries, not your paycheck. Poor dad would buy a new car with salary money. Rich dad would buy an investment that generates income and then use that income to buy the car. That's the difference between consumption and wealth creation. So before buying something new, ask yourself, is this an asset or a liability? Seventh, give first. This might sound strange in a book about money, but Rich Dad believed deeply in generosity. He said, the universe rewards contribution. When you give time, knowledge, effort, or money, you create value. And value always comes back to you. In today's digital world, giving could mean sharing what you learn, teaching others, or creating content that helps people improve their lives. Generosity isn't weakness, it's leverage. Eighth, use fear as fuel. Fear never goes away. Even when you're rich, you'll always face uncertainty, the fear of losing, failing, or being wrong. The trick is to move forward anyway. Rich Dad said, the brave don't live forever, but the cautious never live at all. Each time you act despite fear, you build confidence, and that confidence compounds faster than money ever could. Ninth, master one thing at a time. Wealth doesn't come from doing 100 things halfway, it comes from doing one thing extremely well. Pick a lane, maybe it's investing, content creation, or building a small business, and commit to mastering it. Once it's stable, expand. This focus builds momentum and trust, both with yourself and with others. 10th, never stop learning. Financial freedom is not a destination, it's a lifelong process. The rules of money keep changing, new markets, new technologies, new ways to invest. The people who stay curious will always stay rich. Rich Dad told Robert, money is a game. If you stop learning, you stop winning. And finally, remember why you started. It's easy to get caught up in numbers, income, assets, returns, but wealth isn't just about money. It's about freedom. Freedom to spend time how you want, with who you love, doing what fulfills you. That's the ultimate goal of financial education, to design a life you don't need a vacation from. Let's connect this to today. Imagine you wake up 1 year from now. You've started saving, learned about investing, and made your first small win, maybe a few $100s from an online side hustle or a profitable stock. You're not rich yet, but you're different. You think differently, act differently, and see money differently. That's the moment you realize, wealth isn't something you chase, it's something you build. One decision at a time. So, if you truly want more from life, don't just listen to this message, live it. Build assets, grow your knowledge, choose courage over comfort, help others as you climb. Because Rich Dad's greatest lesson wasn't about getting rich. It was about becoming financially free, so you can live life on your own terms, without fear, without limits, and without regret. As Rich Dad once said, your future is created by what you do today, not tomorrow. So start today. When you reach the final pages of Rich Dad Poor Dad, you realize the book isn't really about money. It's about freedom. It's about learning how to control your own future instead of letting fear, debt, or tradition control it for you. Robert Kiyosaki isn't trying to make you obsessed with getting rich, he's trying to wake you up to a truth that society hides very well. Wealth isn't measured by how much money you earn, but by how long you can live without working. Rich Dad's greatest lesson wasn't about real estate or business, it was about mindset. He believed money is a tool, not a destination. If you understand how to use it, it can build bridges to your dreams. If you don't, it becomes a chain that keeps you trapped. Poor Dad spent his life chasing promotions and pay raises, always believing more income meant more security. But every raise came with higher expenses, bigger taxes, and more stress. Rich Dad focused instead on building systems, assets that quietly produced income even when he wasn't looking. This difference might seem simple, but it's the reason why. In every economy, there will always be people who get richer and others who stay stuck. The rich focus on opportunities, the poor focus on obstacles. The rich invest time in learning, the poor invest time in comfort. The rich think in terms of leverage, the poor think in terms of effort. Think about today's world. People are building digital products, YouTube channels, online courses, rental properties, or investing in startups. They've learned the same thing Rich Dad taught decades ago: the game has changed. But the rules of wealth have not. The real value isn't in working more hours, it's in learning how to make your hours worth more. Robert Kiyosaki closes his book with a challenge, not to just read about financial freedom, but to live it. To start small, to buy one asset, to learn one new skill, to break the cycle of working for money and start building a life where money works for you. Because in the end, the most dangerous thing isn't losing money, it's losing time. You can always make more money, but you can never make more time. So if you're listening to this right now, remember, your financial journey doesn't begin with a paycheck. It begins with a decision to think differently, to learn continuously, and to believe that you are capable of more than trading your life away for a salary. That's the legacy of Rich Dad, Poor Dad. It's not a book you just read once, it's a new lens to see the world through. As Rich Dad said, the poor and the middle class work for money. The rich have money work for them. And once you truly understand that, your life and your future will never be the same again. And that's it for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed this deep dive into Rich Dad, Poor Dad and took away something valuable for your own financial journey. Remember, wealth isn't just about how much you make, it's about how you think, how you learn, and how you use money as a tool for freedom, not fear. If you found this episode inspiring, don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss the next book summary. And I'd love to hear from you. What book should we talk about next? Drop the title you'd like me to summarize in the comments below. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode, where one idea might just change your life.